Okay. So this one's the worst ending, of course. So we'll do like so. Oh, I need a name. That's too long. How about that with a dash? Okay. Some people might think that's obscene if they don't actually get it, but whatever. Again, opening cutscene is not skippable. I could do final thoughts now, but I think I'm going to save it for the end anyway. Is that Jawler? And there's me. Random shoots. Oh, so I was supposed to get entry level Akilini disc, but I didn't though. Yeah, like my bag doesn't actually have any discs in it, so I have to go get a disc. But to get a disc, I have to get through the Anarchy cutscene because I can't, like, to get down to that area, it has to play. Doesn't let me do this 100% good ending material free, does it? Ultra. Yeah, it makes all these speeches, but his movement doesn't really get like mass support. It just gets like a kind of like a swindle team, essentially. As opposed to an army. Okay, talk to this guy for his disc. Yes. I have to sit through all of the meetings again, of course. Because you can't get to any endings without sitting through all 3 meetings. No, I do not. Yes, I do. Here we go. Okay. So there is a risk. What's it a risk of? One more meeting. They might not change sides or something. Okay. Now for the cutscene having to do with the championship. Miss. Oh, I don't have anything to take care of first. Now we could walk to Cafe Revolution, but there's not going to be anybody there. So only this guy is gone. The guy outside at night is also gone. The place is empty. You can wander around Metru Nui. It'll just all be empty. I won't bore you with that. Funny if like a Valky hits you at some point, but I think it just clears all the Matoran out and all the Metru Nui is just empty. Now, the worst ending, you can do this. This happens anytime you go to the balcony after the championship. So you could have everything set up, save for the best ending. The Brotherhood of Artaka set up, the Anarchy stuff set up, and you just decide to go to the balcony at the end instead of Cafe Revolution, maybe just to see what happens. And boom, 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 boom. That's a little bit differently than how I remembered it, but yeah, it's you lose. Plain and simple. And there's nothing here. You just kind of, it's kind of nothing. So I'm gonna restart just to get that music off. So here's what I don't like about MeNOL. So the first thing is, and this is kind of a general thing, is the adoption of the movement scheme from MeNOL 2, where you have this third-person top-down view, and when you move from one screen to another, you have to wait for the character to walk across the screen, which could potentially be a very long time. Now, it's not quite as bad as MeNOL 2 in that you can double-click to move faster. And there are slightly less like fluff, filler, unnecessary screens you have to go through. But I still would prefer more of a the original MeNOL sort of scheme, where you move to the next screen, you just click on it and you instantly go there. Because there's a lot of like non-strategic, not actually doing something to solve the puzzles or play a game and advance the plot time going on, where you're just sitting there waiting for your character to walk across the screen. So, just kind of in general, not really a fan of that format. Now, the whole double click to go twice as fast thing only worked on moving from one screen to another. If you had to go pick up a pickup on the ground, or you had to go to the shoot station, it wouldn't work. Now, there's a bit of a hack that I discovered in my first recording of this. I didn't know of it as a kid, where you could double click on the next, like to go to a next screen, and you could redirect or divert that into wherever you're trying to go, like pick up an uncut rock or something, and it would go double speed to the uncut rock. Because it wouldn't reset the speed. But it's a bit annoying and a lot of clicking around to do. So it's just kind of the general scheme of things. Also, this is kind of a subtle thing. In certain conversations, it doesn't complete the action that's going to take place in the conversation when you click OK or you click yes or whatever. It performs that action once the entire conversation is over. So I experienced this a lot with the Great Temple, where you don't actually get the upgraded protodermis when you say, yes, purify the protodermis, you get it after the conversation is over. I know that makes sense in real life because you have to wait for the person to purify the protodermis, but this is a game. And so it doesn't have to be that way in a game. Same thing with the throwing disc transaction guy. The transaction doesn't happen until after you've done the whole conversation. You said like thank you to each other or whatever. So you can leave the conversation even a little bit early, like just when the last line pops up, but hasn't disappeared yet, and then you can walk off without completing that transaction. I would much prefer if the transaction took place when you select I want to do the transaction, as opposed to at the end of the conversation. And in the same vein, the conversations trade back and forth on a fixed time basis, and you cannot keep clicking to advance the conversation at the pace that you want to advance it, like in MeNOL 2. For some reason, there's a restep back from MeNOL 2 in that sense. And so if you've already done a conversation, you've already listened to all that dialogue, you just want to skip through it, you can't do that. You have to wait for the conversation to play itself out. And this is or if the text goes by too fast, you don't have time to read it, you can't slow it down. And this is the worst in the or the most painful in the situation where I have to do repetitive transactions, like make a bunch of metal plates or make a bunch of metal poles. You can't click through that transaction. You have to do over and over again. You have to wait for the conversation to occur every time. And you also can't do them in batches. You can't say, I'll give you this large sum of widgets for this large sum of metal poles, like you could do it pretty much every single time at the shop in MeNOL 2. You can do it in some cases, like when you're selling cut rocks. You can sell a certain large amount at a time. But with things like with the metal poles and the metal plates, when you trade a certain amount of widgets plus the raw material for the product, you can't. And it kind of adds an unnecessary tedium to the fetch quest. In addition, and also on the same vein of time-based conversations, there are a lot of text in the cutscenes. And this text in the cutscenes goes a little bit fast for my liking. Now, I will admit that most of the time you can read stuff in your head much faster than you can read it aloud. And I don't necessarily think that when you make a video game, you should make it for the target audience of people recording the gameplay. That's not typically how you deal with video games. But I'm still not necessarily happy with, but everybody reads at a different pace. And it's a good idea to make auto-scrolling text scroll at a pace that someone can comfortably read it out loud before it goes on to the next set of text. But even better is not make auto-scrolling text. Do like they do in the original MeNOL, where even in the cutscenes there is text that wouldn't advance until you hit the red arrow. They actually had the text stop in the cutscene and wait for player input to continue the text. They could have tried to do something like that in MeNOL as well. So you wouldn't have to worry about the text pacing. It was all based on the user input. Next would be the fetch quest in general. Generally, video games are supposed to be fun, and sometimes difficulty is good. Difficulty makes it fun, and requiring perseverance can make it fun. However, the fetch quest is not difficult, but is time-consuming and is repetitive. And that is a recipe for, it's just like this mindless, repetitive task. And that is a recipe for being unfun, which is contrary to the spirit of what a video game is supposed to even be. At least with the MeNOL 2 grinding, there were mini-games, and the mini-games would get harder, and some of them actually challenged you and were kind of fun to do, like the accuracy game and the strength game. And at least by making the video games, it showed an attempt to make it fun. Now, there are a lot of unfun ones, like the speed game, but at least they seem to be making an attempt to make the grinding somewhat fun. In this, the fetch quest grind, there's nothing fun about it. It is purely work. It is like a tedious day job. So, something that I very much don't like. Especially certain things in there that are unnecessary that just make it more tedious. Like I said, only one transaction per conversation, fixed speed advancing text conversations. The whole fuel cell thing where because you only had one jar, you couldn't stash up on, 5 batches of pure protodermis at a time. You had to take, because you're one jar, you had to go to Pokoro, back to the Great Temple, then back to the school, back to Pokoro, and that sequence over and over again 5 times. Really makes the fetch quest painful. Next thing, this is my rant about, I made a rant about this at the start of this Let's Play. The more effort doesn't necessarily mean more reward. The entire Brotherhood of Artaka ending being a dud. Usually when you play this, you play it the best ending first, then you go back and see what the sub endings are, right? Just Brotherhood of Artaka and just Anarchy. And when I played this the first time as a kid, I couldn't actually figure out how to do it. So I used a kind of a poorly written and minimal and skeletal walkthrough that was posted on BC Power by a user that was very famous on BC Power at the time named screen name Gata Nui. And I did the best ending according to that guide first, and then I went back and said, okay, what if I do just Anarchy? And it turned out to be very similar to the best ending. And I thought, well, what if I did just Brotherhood of Artaka? That would probably be interesting because we don't actually get to see what the Brotherhood of Artaka would actually do. And I do all this grinding, I do the fetch quest all over again, and I get a complete dud ending. And it's kind of a meme. So that's disappointing. Now, as far as the actual difficulty of finding the endings, I don't know if it's necessarily that difficult. If I were to do it, try to start the silver without that walkthrough today, I could probably hit at least one of those two, Anarchy or Brotherhood of Artaka, without looking it up. However, I couldn't figure it out as a kid. It was really daunting. It has to do with, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily criticize MeNOL for that. I think that's actually kind of a good thing. I like, difficult puzzles that are hard to, I like that kind of puzzle that you're thrown into this big sort of seemingly open world without clear direction. And you have to kind of stumble upon things to kind of figure out what exactly you're supposed to do. That's a fun thing if someone were to play this blind, which is very rare we actually get to see that. It would be cool if we could see Meso do that, but I don't know if we'll ever see it. How exact their process of figuring out how to get an ending, it would be fun to watch. But as a kid at the time, it was like really intimidating and I couldn't figure out what to do with it. And so I just ended up looking it up. Because I wasn't into Let's Plays at the time. And so because of that, I wasn't as adverse to looking up the solutions to game problems as I am now. So what do I like about MeNOL? Well, like I just said, I liked how it tried to imitate the style of Matsu Online game and the Matsu Online game 2, both of which, at least if you play them after all the updates, are like you're being thrown into this big island without really that clear of direction about what you're supposed to do. With the Matsu Online game 2, you're supposed to win the Cully tournament, but that's not all you have to do, and the rest you have to figure it out. Same thing with the original MeNOL, although the original MeNOL kind of funnels itself into something linear towards the end. It tries to be in that spirit and not funnel you into a linear progression of quests and give you this big kind of open Metru Nui with all these locations and characters, and you have to figure out how to advance the plot and actually funnel yourself into that linear progression, which never actually really gets quite that linear. So I like that about it. And that's, again, something that would make it, if someone were to do a blind Let's Play at this, it would make it fun to react to. I also like the concept of multiple endings. I like multiple ending games. I play so many multiple ending games. That is, yeah, it's my favorite type of game, essentially. So, even though I don't know if it's necessarily well executed the structure of the multiple endings, that they tried to make a multiple ending game, I really appreciate that. Also, although it's not canon, I kind of like the weird parody twists they did on the canon. Like, they adapted the concept and thought, maybe we should make this a little bit more political sounding. Because we need to figure out a way to put a Matoran perspective into the events of the 2004 story, and a way that a Matoran could actually have power and influence in that society. So there's a way to construct a game around that. because the canonical story published by Lego Scholastic didn't really make it sound like you could really do you don't need to be a Toa to be a hero sort of thing with Metru Nui. There was no Matoran resistance like in 06 and 04. There was no Takua-like character in 04. There were Matoran, but all the Matoran were portrayed as nincompoops and like Vajibons. These Matoran that the Toa had to track down to figure out the location of the Great Discs. The Matoran play very little, individual Matoran characters play essentially zero heroic roles in 2004 whatsoever. So you have to manipulate around the 2004 story to give a Matoran a hero-like role. And so they kind of warped it and made it not really canon, somewhat non-canon in nature, to fit a Matoran in there. And the way they did it was kind of meme-ish, but that just made it kind of funny and entertaining, even though I sort of expressed some frustration along the way with it. And it's kind of boring after you've seen those meeting cutscenes so many times, trying to get all of the endings. And of course, it makes even less sense canonically once you know about the GSR, but they didn't know about that in 2005 when they made this game. So, as you could tell. They didn't know the full context of 2004, what the Great Cataclysm actually was, how it was caused, and so on. So they had to work with what they had to work with. And they invented these concepts like the Grand Council meeting that were not in the original story, but there was a way, that was kind of a way to make a story and to make this whole thing work. And of course, lastly, it's a Bionicle fan game that was actually finished. It was finished by Bionicle fans in 2005, and the Bionicle fan base was still relatively young. And it is completely finished. Although the Brotherhood of Otaka ending might seem disappointing, it's still finished. It's not incomplete, it's done. And the Bionicle fan projects seem to have this reputation of they tend to be doomed. But that's just this, I don't know about this reputation. You can definitely find examples of Bionicle fan games that have been finished. Like the Metru Nui online game, like Bionicle Paracosmos and so on. So, yeah. And that's all I really have to say. It'd be fun to see a blind Let's Play of this. I don't think there is one. Someone please make one. Of course, it wouldn't make any sense to respond to that call if you're already at the end of mine. So pass this on to someone else. But if you watched this, thank you for watching it. And I'll stop right here.